Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Isla, which is a 1 to 4 player roll and write style game that, according to the box, takes 45 to 60 minutes to play, but from my experience it is actually quicker than that. Now before I get started, this is a prototype copy of the game, so of course all of the components here are not final, and this game will be coming up on Kickstarter, I believe, in February. But before I get started on my review of Isla, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so Isla is going to look like this when it is set up, where each player will have their own player sheet, which you can see is made up of all these different terrain types, as well as these tokens which have been randomly distributed on the map and placed on these kind of highlighted spaces here. You have your own little explorer that starts in the bottom left-hand corner of the board where your little boat is, as well as these dice exhaustion tokens, which is kind of one of the key elements to the game. You have 5 different dice here that come in the different, the different denominations, from a D4 all the way up to a D10, I believe, as well as a couple of decks of cards where you have these kind of research cards where you're trying to cash in the relevant tokens which are distributed on your map for the relevant amount of points. So you can see here that if I cashed in one of these leaf cards, a parrot card, and a skull card, then I would get 11 points at the end of the game. You also have a big deck of these threat cards that can come into play. So before we get into the mechanisms, let's take a look at how the game actually scores, and of course the player with the most points here will be the winner. So first off, if you are the first player to get out of the island by escaping through this top right hand corner here, then you'll get a bonus 5 points, and if you're second place you'll get 3 points. You'll get any points based on the research cards you collect throughout the game. You'll get any points based on the threat cards that you collect throughout the game, and they can be positive or negative, and we'll take a look at some of those cards later. Any unused dice points. So as I said, if any of these tokens remain kind of unexhausted at the end of the game, you'll get the points that's depicted on those exact tiles. The escape track, where if you kind of push beyond that escape route, any kind of overspill will start generating you points all the way to a maximum of 10. And finally, you will lose points based on every unexplored space on the map. So ideally you ought to be covering as much of the map as you can, or you already start racking up those negative points. So how does the game actually work? So first off, each player is going to decide what they want to do for the round, and you have one of 3 options. The first of which is to actually explore the map, which is what you'll be doing more than often. The second of which is, again, researching one of these cards, or the third of which is to use the rest action, which you have one option to do that throughout the game, or another one should you collect this bonus rest token. And if you take that rest action, you are going to unexhaust the leftmost exhausted dice token on your player sheet. Again, the research action is going to let you buy one of these, and of course the explore action will let you traverse the board. So once each player has chosen which action they wish to take, then you are going to, as the first player, roll the 5 dice like so. And if you roll a 1, so let's just say I rolled a 1 here, and it doesn't matter how many you roll, as long as you roll at least 1, you are going to reveal and collect the top threat card from that deck and put it onto your little next to your board essentially, or next to your sheet. And you can see here, this one has given me a bit of a challenge that says you add these victory points, as in these 6 victory points, at the end of the game if you have explored all of the beach spaces. So this is going to be a bit of an objective for me to go around and visit all of these beach spaces scattered amongst the map. And some of these cards, again, are challenges like that. Some of them are punishments, like this one here says, you got -1 movement this turn. That's the duplicates there, and so on. Again, we'll talk about some of these a bit later. You've got some quite nasty ones, like this out of breath card that says you exhaust your triangle die. Okay, so let's assume I've taken the explore action and I've already resolved any threats I rolled. I am going to choose one of these dice that have been rolled. So in this example, I'm going to choose this green 4, just to show you how one of the mechanisms works. So because I rolled a 4, I'm going to, and I chose the green die, first of all, I'm going to exhaust my green die token like so, meaning that I cannot choose that die again until this is unexhausted. And the way you unexhaust the dice tokens is by passing through or touching one of the matching die symbols on the map here. So because I moved 4, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. And because I've touched, again, this triangle, I'm going to unexhaust that die token, meaning that I can use it again in the future. And of course, I would be actually marking this on my player sheet, showing the direction that I've moved, like so, just to recall which direction I've moved and so on, because you can never backtrack on yourself or pass through an area that you've already explored. And that's essentially how the game works. As you can imagine, you're trying to traverse the board as much as you can by keeping your dice tokens unexhausted so you can keep moving and have more options. You're trying to collect the tokens. You're trying to take research actions in order to cash in for these contracts. You're trying to overcome the threats you're getting, and so on. And of course, you're going to keep on going until you've exited the island, getting those extra points by being there first, as well as travelling further down this track. And of course, trying to avoid getting trapped on the island, because if you run out of these dice tokens by having them all exhausted and even using your rest action, then your game is going to be pretty much over, and you're going to be just stuck on the island and have to settle with the points you already have. And that is how Isla works. So let's take a look at a few more of these threat cards just to give you an idea about what's in that deck. So you have this rushed cards here that says you get minus 2 points. But if you discard the threat, if another player escapes the island. So, that's a bit of a gamble, that one. You're going to get minus 2 points, but there's a good chance you'll lose those or not have to suffer those minus 2 points as long as somebody else escapes. You've got the hallucination cards here that says the opponent to your left will choose which die you use this turn. And as you can imagine, they're going to want to force you to use a very inefficient dice. You've got the poisoned one here that says you get minus 3 movement. The wasted effort card, you get minus 1 point per unused species token at the end of the game. So you want to be making sure that you cash in those species tokens for these research contracts. The deja vu that says you play this card next to the dice pool on the next round. The dice are not re-rolled, so you're stuck with the original roll. And the sprain one here that says you exhaust your square die and then discard this card. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Isla. And for me, kind of the biggest thing about this game that I liked the most was this dice exhaustion system here. I think this is a really novel idea, and it's quite cool after seeing so many roll and write style games. A concept that I personally haven't seen before. I can't say for sure if it's been done before or not, but I haven't seen it on a personal level. And it actually adds a cool system to the game where you're trying to keep on ticking along as much as you can, knowing when to reach further to collect one of these tokens maybe, as well as keeping as many of your dice unexhausted. Because before you know it, if you do not bear this in mind, your tokens to get quickly exhausted, and you're going to leave yourself out of options. So you always want to be making sure you reach that next checkpoint and think ahead, and even kind of unexhaust several tokens at once you start using these higher rolls. If you use this D12 like this, then you can imagine you can travel the board quite a lot, but to refresh that particular die, the refresh tokens are right towards the exit, therefore you're not going to be able to keep on using that one again and again. So it's quite nice how it spreads from the the D4 to the D6 to the D8 and so on. So it's really nice, kind of a pacing to the game when it kind of almost lures you to reach further at times and take a gamble on whether you're going to roll a high number the next time to reach that next checkpoint. The remainder of the game is fairly simple stuff. You've got some simple contract fulfillment here, just collecting these tokens and cashing them in against these contracts. But there is somewhat of a sense of urgency if you and your opponents are looking for the same things. And I think they seem to be weighted pretty accurately. Some of the tokens are quite common. You've got 4 of these, but you've only got 2 of these. Therefore, the contracts with these on are worth more points, naturally. And there's some extra touches that I did appreciate. Like, for example, I do like the idea of when you overspill to escape, you start generating more points. That's a mechanism I generally like in games, where you are rewarded for your overcompensation, as well as, that push and pull of wanting to stay on the map to explore as much as possible, but getting some bonus points by escaping the board. Now, a part of the game that I do not feel is going to be for everybody is the way that these threat cards are balanced as well as the way they are resolved, because, you know, as the first player, if you roll a 1 on any of these 5 dice, which is quite likely, then you're going to have to take and resolve one of these cards. And they do range from pretty benign to pretty awful in terms of how punishing they are. Because, you know, if you leave yourself, say, with completely relying on one of these dice exhaustion tokens, and then you just, by bad luck, draw a card that exhausts that particular token, then that could be you completely out of the game if you have not used your rest token. So they can be pretty punishing. Some of them I think are actually quite cool. Like, I actually like this Sunbather one that says, you know, you add these victory points if you explore all of a certain region or a certain terrain type by the end of the game, because that kind of gives you this devil's temptation of, you know, do I really gamble and try to go through all those beach spaces, knowing that going for them is going to potentially, you know, leave me with not enough fuel in my tank to keep going and reach these new dice spots. So I actually think more cards like this would have been a better idea. And I think there could have been a less random way to resolve getting the threats, because, you know, just by sheer good luck or bad luck, you can keep on avoiding these threats, or you can get hit by one every single time, which can definitely be a difference maker in who wins or loses the game through, again, no fault of your own. I also feel the game could have benefited from a bit more streamlining when it comes to which action you choose, because, again, the rules state that kind of before the round even begins, you choose whether you want to explore by, again, moving around your board, whether you want to rest up, or whether you want to research and take one of these cards. And I kind of understand why they've done it, because that happens before you roll the dice. So if you commit to, you know, taking a contract and then the dice are rolled and they're all great numbers, you might think, maybe I should have taken that gamble and explored. So I understand what they're going for there, but I think the gameplay experience would have been enhanced if every round you just roll the dice, and then if you want to, you can rest. Then everybody does their explore action, and then in player order, should you wish to, you can cash in your tokens. Again, everybody's on the same level then, everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, rather than people doing different phases at different times. Because it's not like it makes a huge difference, because you're going to have to factor in turn order anyway, and turn order is passed in the standard order by going from, you know, player to your left. So it kind of seems like it's over convoluted the turn system more than it needed to be, whereas they could have just kept it very standardized and have just made everybody do the same thing. The player interaction is somewhat of a mixed bag. Yes, you do have the competition of fighting for the contracts, and some of the threats do interact with the other players in a little bit of a take that way. Nothing major. I suppose the biggest issue I have is that there is a somewhat pseudo-player elimination thing going on here, because if your opponent runs out of steam and you don't, then they're going to have to just sit there and watch you play out the remainder of your game, which kind of seems pointless if you know you've already beaten your opponent, because they're probably going to have so many unexplored places, and that's so many negative points. So, you know, the incentive to continue once your opponents have been elimination is pretty much non-existent, which is a bit of a shame. I also feel the replayability could be a bit of an issue with this game, because, again, I'm not sure if this is going to be with a final copy, but the prototype that I've been given is all of the same sheet. There's no variability, but I do feel like this game actually has a lot of potential through this system to create a ton of different maps, and even using that core system to add little wrinkles and little tricks and bells and whistles into that system by, you know, creating additional mechanisms, which certainly isn't going to be too much of a rules overhaul. So yeah, I think the actual system itself is nice and pure and can lend itself to lots of replayability. But if this is what you're getting in the final box, which I doubt it will be, it's not going to be quite enough to keep you coming back. And I also feel the time investment is actually quite good with this game. Now, I'm not quite sure why the box says 45 to 60 minutes. Again, this is a prototype version, so please take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, this you can get it played in 20 to 30 minutes, which is quite a nice little time investment. Should you get a good game out of it. So yeah, I think the time investment is pretty good, and what you'd expect with a roll and write style game. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Isla. And again, I want to stress this is a prototype copy of the game. There could be huge differences between this and what the final product is. So yeah, please do bear that in mind. But I think the game system here is a lot of fun. And I do love this dice exhaustion system of trying to reach that next checkpoint to refresh your dice, just so you can continue a little bit more, check a few more boxes off and reach for that next contract. And it even has this little push your luck thing going on at times, because you do not know what you're going to be able to move. You might leave yourself with one of the high die available, still unexhausted, but if you roll a low value, you're still only moving one space. So you're always kind of gambling on how far you can travel and if you're going to reach that next checkpoint. I do like how some of the little things have been considered here. That overspill I really like. The extra refresh token I like. Very simple contract fulfillment stuff, which is never going to be a bad thing. Simple stuff. And again, the urgency to reach those tokens before your opponents get to them. I'm not quite sure why the deck's so big, because you could have just done a standardized bunch of different ones and make people reach for them, rather than doing this kind of refresh system. But that's very, very nitpicky. Again, the threat system I think is a little bit too swingy for my taste, because again, you can get absolutely battered by this through no fault of your own, or you can get completely scot-free and not have to worry about it at all. So again, I think that's a little bit too lucky, and people should get the same kind of set amount, or they should affect all players, or something like that, just to make sure that nobody's going to get rubbed the wrong way. Yes, it is a light and silly roll and write game, but I think some people aren't going to like that just at face value, really. But for the time investment, it's a nice roll and write. I don't think it's up there with the best of them, but I think if you like games like maybe something like the Trails of Tucana, this is something that's somewhat in the same vein, and you're going to get somewhat similar feelings and an experience out of it. So yeah, it's a pleasant game, and you do have to weigh up quite a lot. There are different decisions you need to weigh up here. How far do you want to jump past the exit? How many spaces are you leaving kind of ticked off or exposed to start generating you those negative points, and so on. So if it appeals to you, be sure to check out the Kickstarter campaign coming up for Isla.